Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're tackling something that I know a lot of you are interested in the science of healthy eating.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so much information out there. That's why I wanted to do this deep dive. We've got this super detailed article that breaks down the latest research. I've been geeking out over it all week, and I can't wait to share some of the highlights with you.
Well, you know me, I always love digging into the science behind things. There are just so many myths, A&D misconceptions floating around about healthy eating, so it's great to finally separate fact from fiction.
Well, that's exactly what I love about these deep dives. We get to go beyond the headlines, really unpack the nuances. And
hmm
one of the first things that jumped out at me from this article was the emphasis on healthy eating as a lifestyle, not just a diet.
Right. It's not about some quick fix or a temporary restriction.
Yeah.
It's about making sustainable changes that support your well-being in the long run.
Exactly. And the article used this analogy that really clicked for me. They compared our bodies to high-performance cars.
Oh, like that.
Right? You wouldn't put just any old fuel in a Ferrari, right? You'd want the premium stuff to keep it running smoothly.
Makes sense.
And that's kind of how it is with our bodies. We need to give them the right fuel to function at their best.
And that fuel comes in the form of macronutrients, those essential building blocks of our diet: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Each one plays a crucial role in keeping our bodies running optimally.
I'm so glad you brought those up. I think a lot of people get confused about the roles of carbs, protein, and fats. The article did a great job of breaking it down.
Well, think of it this way. Carbs are like your initial energy burst, the fuel that gets you going. Proteins are the building blocks. They help repair tissues and build muscle. And healthy fats, those are essential for hormone production, brain function, and keeping your cells happy.
It's like a well-balanced team, each player contributing their unique strengths.
I like that analogy.
And speaking of brains, I have to admit, this whole gut-brain connection thing completely blew my mind.
Oh, it's fascinating, isn't it?
You-
For years, we kind of thought of the gut and the brain as separate entities. But now, science is revealing this incredible communication network between them,
Seriously, who knew our stomachs had so much influence on our brains?
right? It turns out that trillions of microorganisms live in our gut, collectively known as the gut microbiome. And these little guys are in constant communication with our brains, sending signals back and forth through a complex network of nerves and chemicals.
So it's not just some woo-woo concept. There's actual science behind the idea that what we eat can impact how we think and feel.
Absolutely. And it's not just about mental clarity and focus. Research is showing that the gut microbiome also plays a role in mood regulation, stress response, and even conditions like anxiety and depression.
That's incredible. So we're talking about things like eating yogurt could potentially help with anxiety.
Well, yogurt's a great example because it's a source of probiotics, those live beneficial bacteria that can help to replenish and diversify the gut microbiome.
So it's like adding good citizens to our gut city.
Right, exactly. And when we have a diverse and balanced gut microbiome, it can have a positive ripple effect on our overall well-being, including our mental health.
This is seriously revolutionary stuff. But I know what some of our listeners might be thinking, okay, that's great for mental health, but what about the physical stuff? Does unhealthy eating really have that big of an impact?
Oh, it does. Think about it. When we constantly bombard our bodies with processed foods, sugary drinks, and unhealthy fats, we're essentially creating a state of chronic inflammation.
Ah, inflammation, the word everyone's talking about.
Yeah.
But what does it actually mean in this context?
Well, in a nutshell, inflammation is your body's natural response to injury or infection.
Yeah.
But when it becomes chronic, low-grade inflammation simmering below the surface, it can actually start damaging healthy tissues and organs.
So it's like a fire that's gotten out of control, right?
Exactly. And unhealthy eating habits can fuel that fire, increasing the risk of chronic diseases like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and even certain types of cancer.
Okay, so we're talking about serious stuff here. This is definitely a wake-up call to pay attention to what we're putting into our bodies. But you know me, I also love a good myth-busting session. So let's tackle some of those common misconceptions about healthy eating head on.
Let's do it.
All right, myth number one, all fats are bad. Come on, people, we know better than that by now, right?
Right. It's important to differentiate between healthy fats and unhealthy fats. Trans fats, those artificially created fats found in many processed foods, are the real villains here.
They're the ones we want to avoid, like the plague.
But healthy fats, like those found in avocados, nuts, olive oil, and fatty fish, are actually essential for our health. They help with hormone production, cell function, and can even lower bad cholesterol levels.
Okay, myth busted. On to the next one. All carbs are evil. This one drives me crazy.
I know, right? Carbs have gotten such a bad rap lately, but they're actually our body's primary source of energy. It's all about choosing the right kinds of carbs.
Exactly. We want to ditch those refined carbs like white bread and sugary cereals and focus on complex carbs like whole grains, fruits, and vegetables.
Those complex carbs provide sustained energy, fiber, and essential nutrients. They're your friends, not your foes.
Okay, 2 myths down, 2 to go. Myth number 3. Healthy eating is expensive. I hear this one all the time.
And it's simply not true. There's so many ways to eat healthy on a budget.
The article had some great tips on this, like beans and lentils are incredibly affordable and versatile. You can buy frozen fruits and vegetables, which are often cheaper than fresh. And you can even explore things like canned fish, which is a great source of protein and omega-3 fatty acids.
And cooking at home more often can also save you money in the long run. It gives you more control over the ingredients and portion sizes.
Okay, so we've debunked the myth that healthy eating has to break the bank. Now, on to the final myth. Healthy eating means saying no to everything fun. I mean, where's the joy in that?
Right. Life's too short to be miserable about food.
Exactly. And the article really emphasized that healthy eating is not about deprivation or restriction. It's about finding a sustainable balance.
It's about enjoying your favorite foods in moderation while making sure that the majority of your diet is made up of those nutrient-rich whole foods that nourish your body and mind.
I love that approach. It's about finding a way to make healthy eating a part of your life, not a punishment.
And it's important to remember that healthy eating isn't a one-size-fits-all concept. Everyone's body is different, and what works for one person might not work for another.
So there's no magic formula, no perfect diet that applies to everyone.
Nope. The article really stressed the importance of personalization. It's about paying attention to how your body responds to different foods, understanding your individual needs and preferences, and finding what works best for you.
It's like becoming a scientist of your own body.
I love that analogy.
Right.
And it ties back to that gut-brain connection we were talking about earlier.
Oh, right.
Remember how I mentioned that the gut microbiome plays a role in so many aspects of our health? Well, each person's microbiome is unique, just like their fingerprint.
So what works for one person's gut might not work for another's.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to tune into your body's signals, experiment with different foods, and find what feels best for you.
Okay, so we've debunked some myths, we've talked about the gut-brain connection, and we've emphasized the importance of personalization. Now, let's get practical. How do we actually put all of this amazing knowledge into action? The article had some great tips on making healthy eating a habit, and I think they're worth exploring.
Absolutely. Let's dive into those.
Okay, so we've debunked some myths, we've talked about the gut-brain connection, and we've emphasized the importance of personalization. Now, let's get practical. How do we actually put all of this amazing knowledge into action? The article had some great tips on making healthy eating a habit, and I think they're worth exploring.
Absolutely. Let's dive into those. One thing that really resonated with me from the first part of our deep dive was this idea that healthy eating should be sustainable. Like it's a lifestyle, not just some fad diet you try for a few weeks.
Totally agree. I think that's where a lot of people get tripped up, right? They try to make these drastic changes all at once, and then it's just not sustainable. It's too overwhelming.
Exactly. And then they end up feeling like they failed. But the article made a great point about starting small. Like instead of trying to overhaul your entire diet overnight, just focus on making one or two small changes at a time.
That's such great advice. It's like those tiny habits, right? You build momentum over time.
Mm.
So what kind of small changes are we talking about here? Give us some examples.
Well, let's say you drink soda every day. Maybe start by swapping one of those sodas for a glass of water. Or if you usually have white bread for your sandwich, try switching to whole grain bread. Simple things like that can make a big difference over time.
It's like those little swaps add up, right? You don't even notice them after a while, but your body sure does.
Exactly. And another great tip from the article was meal prepping. I know it sounds kind of boring, but trust me, it's a game changer.
Oh, I'm a huge fan of meal prepping. It saves so much time and stress during the week.
Right. And it helps you avoid those moments when you're starving and you just reach for whatever's quick and easy, which is often not the healthiest choice.
I'm so guilty of that. When I'm hungry, my decision-making skills go right out the window.
Totally. So by prepping your meals, or at least some of your components in advance, You're setting yourself up for success. Like you could chop up a bunch of veggies on Sunday night so they're ready to throw into stir fries or salads throughout the week, or cook a big batch of quinoa or brown rice that you can use as a base for different meals.
I love those ideas. And speaking of setting yourself up for success, the article also talked about mindful eating. What's that all about?
Mindful eating is all about being present and paying attention to your food while you're eating it. It's about slowing down, savoring the flavors, and really tuning into your body's signals of hunger and fullness.
It sounds so simple, but I have to admit, I'm terrible at this. I'm usually multitasking, eating while I'm working, or scrolling through my phone.
I think most of us are guilty of that. But here's the thing. When we're distracted while we're eating, we often miss those subtle cues that tell us we're satisfied. And then we end up overeating, which can leave us feeling sluggish and bloated.
So, mindful eating is kind of like a superpower, right? It helps us tune into our body's wisdom.
Exactly. And it can make eating more enjoyable too. When you slow down and savor each bite, you actually taste the food more fully and appreciate the experience.
Okay, I'm definitely going to try to be more mindful at my next meal. Any other tips from the article that stood out to you?
Well, they talk about the importance of reading labels. I know it can seem daunting, but it doesn't have to be complicated.
I'll admit, I sometimes get overwhelmed by all the numbers and ingredients on food labels.
I hear ya. But the key is to focus on a few key things, like check the serving size, look at the amount of added sugars, and pay attention to the ingredient list. Try to choose foods with shorter ingredient lists, pronounceable ingredients, and ingredients you recognize.
It's like being a food detective.
Exactly. And speaking of ingredients, the article also emphasized the importance of variety.
Ah, yes, the eat the rainbow advice.
It's more than just a catchy slogan, though. Different colored fruits and vegetables contain different vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. So by eating a wide variety of colors, we're ensuring that we're getting a broader spectrum of nutrients.
I love that visual eat the rainbow. It's so much easier to remember than trying to keep track of specific vitamins and minerals.
Right. And it makes your plate look more appealing, too.
Okay, so we've talked about starting small, meal prepping, mindful eating, reading labels, and eating the rainbow. Those are some great practical tips. But what about the mental game of healthy eating? I think a lot of people struggle with motivation, willpower, and staying on track, especially when life gets busy or stressful.
You know, I think that's where self-compassion comes in. The article touched on this, and it really resonated with me. It's so easy to beat ourselves up when we slip up or make choices we're not proud of.
Oh, totally. I'm definitely my own worst critic when it comes to food.
But that kind of negative self-talk is actually counterproductive. It just makes us feel worse and less likely to make healthy choices in the future.
So, how do we cultivate self-compassion?
It starts with recognizing that we're all human.
Yeah.
We all make mistakes. We all have moments of weakness, and that's okay.
It's about giving ourselves permission to be imperfect, right?
Exactly. And it's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a friend who was struggling. So the next time you slip up, don't beat yourself up about it. Just acknowledge it, learn from it, and move on.
That's such a powerful shift in perspective. And, speaking of perspective, this whole deep dive is really making me rethink my relationship with food. It's not just about calories or macros or even nutrients. It's about nourishing my body and mind with foods that make me feel good, energized, and vibrant.
I love that. It's about finding that sweet spot where nourishment meets enjoyment. And when you approach healthy eating from that place, it becomes so much more sustainable and enjoyable.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. But before we wrap up part two, I want to talk about something that often gets overlooked when we talk about healthy eating hydration.
Oh, yes. Hydration is absolutely essential for our overall health and well-being. It affects everything from our energy levels and digestion to our cognitive function and skin health.
The article mentioned that most adults should aim for around 8 glasses of water per day. Is that a good rule of thumb?
Yeah, that's a good starting point. But it can vary depending on your activity level, the climate you live in, and even your diet. Some foods, like fruits and vegetables, naturally contain a lot of water, so you might not need to drink as much if you're eating plenty of those.
So it's about listening to your body and recognizing those thirst cues.
Exactly. And don't wait until you're already feeling thirsty to drink water. By then, you're already slightly dehydrated. Try to sip on water throughout the day.
Any tips for making hydration more fun and appealing? Sometimes plain water can get a little boring.
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorite tricks is to infuse my water with fruits, herbs, or even veggies. Like you could add slices of cucumber and lemon, or some fresh berries and mint leaves. It not only tastes more refreshing, but it also looks beautiful.
I love that idea. It's like turning your water into a spa treatment. And speaking of treating ourselves well, I think we're ready to move on to part three of our deep dive, where we'll explore the fascinating world of the gut microbiome and all its secrets. Welcome back to our deep dive on the fascinating world of healthy eating. We've covered so much ground already, but this last part is where it gets really, really interesting. We're talking about the gut microbiome.
You know, it's true. It really is mind-blowing when you think about it. Trillions of these microscopic organisms living inside us, influencing our health in ways we're only just beginning to understand.
Yeah, it's like having a whole ecosystem in our bellies.
It is a whole bustling city of bacteria.
I love that image. And speaking of cities, the article we've been discussing really emphasized how important diversity is for a healthy gut microbiome.
Right, diversity is key. Just like a thriving city needs all sorts of people and businesses to function well, a healthy gut needs a wide variety of bacterial species.
So it's not just about having a lot of bacteria in there, it's about having the right mix.
Exactly. It's about balance. And one of the best ways to support a diverse gut microbiome is to eat plenty of fiber.
Ah, fiber. Always so important.
It is. Fiber acts as a prebiotic, which basically means it's food for the good bacteria in our gut. It helps them thrive and multiply.
So it's like we're feeding the citizens of our gut city, making sure they have what they need to flourish. What are some good sources of fiber we should be eating?
Oh, there are so many. Think whole grains like brown rice, quinoa, oats, fruits and vegetables, of course, legumes, beans, lentils. All those plant-based foods are naturally rich in fiber.
So we're talking about those colorful fruits and veggies again, huh? Eat the rainbow.
Exactly. And another great way to boost those beneficial bacteria is to incorporate fermented foods into your diet.
Oh, I love fermented foods. Sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt, kombucha, kefir.
All fantastic sources of probiotics, those live beneficial bacteria that can help replenish and diversify the gut microbiome.
I knew there was a reason I loved those tangy, fermented flavors. They're actually good for me.
They are. But just like a city can be disrupted by pollution or overcrowding, our gut microbiome can be negatively impacted by certain dietary and lifestyle choices too.
Okay, so what are some things that can disrupt that delicate balance in our gut?
Well, the usual suspects, processed foods, sugary drinks, and excessive amounts of unhealthy fats. Those can all throw things off and lead to an overgrowth of harmful bacteria.
It's like we're polluting our gut city.
Exactly. And it's not just about what we eat. Stress, lack of sleep, even certain medications can also have a negative impact on the gut microbiome.
Wow, this is really highlighting how interconnected everything is. Our gut health is linked to so many other aspects of our well-being.
It is, and it underscores the importance of taking a holistic approach to our health. We can't just focus on one area in isolation. It's all connected.
Okay, so much to think about. From those tiny habits to meal prepping, mindful eating, reading labels, eating the rainbow, nourishing our gut microbiome, to even being kind to ourselves along the way. This has been an incredible deep dive.
It has. And, you know, it's true. Even for someone like me who's always reading about this stuff, there's always something new to learn.
Absolutely. And that's what I love about these deep dives. We get to explore these topics in depth, debunk some myths, and empower ourselves with knowledge, and hopefully inspire our listeners to make some positive changes in their own lives.
Right. Even just one small change can make a difference.
So true. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. This whole conversation has really emphasized that healthy eating is not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about making choices that nourish your body and mind, finding joy in the process, and being kind to yourself along the way. So go forth and eat well. We'll see you next time for another fascinating deep dive.